The Galactic Council had been very clear about humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vrex Dominion had made the pronouncement with characteristic bluntness during Earth's first diplomatic contact. Your species is soft, pink, fragile. You have no natural weapons, no armor plating, no ability to survive in vacuum. You are prey animals that somehow develop technology. Captain Sarah Chen remembered those words as she stood in the observation deck of the GSV Defiance, watching the impossible unfold in the void before her. 3 months ago, the galaxy had been losing a war against an enemy that had appeared from beyond the galactic rim. Creatures the Council had designated as Devourers. They were living ships the size of cities, with hides that shrugged off plasma cannons and mouths that could swallow battle cruisers whole. The Vrex had lost their entire Fourth Fleet to a single Devourer. The crystalline Kethmori had seen their homeworld's orbital defenses consumed in minutes. The proud warrior race of the Thulan hegemony had retreated to their core worlds, admitting defeat for the first time in their recorded history. But humans, the Council had decided, were too fragile to be of any military use. They would be evacuated to designated refugee zones while the real warriors handled the crisis. Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the scene playing out in the darkness ahead. The Devourer, a massive, writhing thing covered in bioluminescent patches and lined with rows of teeth larger than starfighters, hung motionless in space. It wasn't dead. Its vital signs pulsed steadily on her tactical display. It was simply calm. "Status report, Rodriguez," she called to her xenobiology officer. Lieutenant Maria Rodriguez looked up from her console, grinning. "Vital signs are stable, Captain. Stress hormones at baseline. Brain activity shows patterns consistent with what we'd call contentment in Earth cetaceans. I think it's actually happy." Through the observation window, they could see the reason why. Floating next to the kilometer-long creature, a tiny figure in a reinforced EVA suit scratched along one of the beast's massive fins. Even at this distance, they could see the Devourer's obvious pleasure as it rolled slightly, presenting a new section for attention. "Dr. Patterson to Defiance," came the familiar voice over the comm. "You might want to record this. I think our friend here wants to show us something." The Devourer began to move, but not with the predatory grace it had displayed during its attacks on Council fleets. Instead, it moved like a massive dog bringing a stick to its owner. From somewhere within its cavernous maw, it produced the intact hull of a Vrex destroyer, one that had been presumed destroyed in the battle 3 days prior. "Incredible," Rodriguez breathed. "It's been keeping the ship safe. Look at the hull integrity. It's actually in better condition than when it was swallowed." Sarah nodded, thinking back to the revelation that had changed everything. Dr. Patterson, Earth's leading xenobiologist, had been the first to suggest that the Devourers weren't malevolent invaders but rather confused, frightened animals driven from their home by some unknown catastrophe. His theory had been laughed at by the Council's military advisors. "These are apex predators," General Thurak had snarled during the emergency session. "They have destroyed 17 battle groups. They are weapons of war incarnate." But Patterson had persisted. "General, with respect, humans have been dealing with apex predators for our entire evolutionary history. We know the difference between malice and fear, between hunting and lashing out in panic." The first contact attempt had been humanity's idea. While the Council's forces engaged the Devourers in conventional battle, losing ship after ship, Dr. Patterson had approached alone in a modified science vessel. No weapons, no threatening postures, just curiosity and what the other species had mockingly called human naivety. It had taken 6 hours of patient, gentle contact before the first Devourer had allowed Patterson close enough to touch it. What he'd discovered had revolutionized their understanding. These weren't mindless monsters, but highly intelligent creatures with complex emotional needs. They attacked because they were starving, not for matter or energy, but for contact, for companionship, for the pack bonds that their species required to survive. "Captain," came Patterson's voice again, "I'm ready to attempt the next phase." Sarah watched as the doctor activated a device he'd cobbled together from spare parts and theories about cetacean communication. The low-frequency pulses it generated were designed to mimic the social calls of Earth's great whales, modified for the Devourer's presumed communication range. The response was immediate. The Devourer's bioluminescent patches began pulsing in complex patterns, and from across the system, similar patterns appeared as 3 more of the massive creatures emerged from hyperspace. But instead of the aggressive formations they'd used in attacks, they moved in what could only be described as a family group. "They're talking," Rodriguez whispered. "They're actually talking to each other." Over the comm, they heard Patterson's elated voice. "Defiance, you need to see this. They're showing me something, memories, I think. Images of their home system before. Oh God, their star went nova. They're refugees, not invaders. They've been alone in space for decades, maybe centuries." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the same feeling she'd had when she'd first held her newborn daughter, or when she'd watched footage of Earth's last whale songs before the species was saved from extinction. It was the recognition of something precious and vulnerable that needed protection. "Rodriguez, patch me through to Admiral Harrison at Fleet Command." "Aye, Captain." "Channel open." "Admiral, this is Captain Chen. We've made first successful communication with the Devourers. They're not hostiles, they're refugees seeking sanctuary. Requesting permission to establish formal diplomatic contact." The pause was long enough that Sarah wondered if they'd lost the connection. Finally, Admiral Harrison's voice crackled through. "Captain, please confirm. Are you telling me that humanity has domesticated the galaxy's greatest threat?" Sarah looked out at the scene before her. Dr. Patterson now floating alongside 4 massive creatures, each one gently nuzzling against him like cosmic puppies seeking affection. The Vrex destroyer had been carefully deposited near the Defiance, its crew rescued and unharmed. "Sir, I wouldn't say domesticated. I'd say we've made friends." 3 days later, the Galactic Council sat in stunned silence as they watched the footage from the first joint operation between human forces and their new Devourer allies. A pirate stronghold that had resisted Council forces for years had been dismantled in minutes, not through destruction, but through precision. The Devourers had carefully extracted every ship and structure, delivering pirates and hostages alike unharmed to Council custody. Ambassador Zethkar's mandibles clicked in what his species displayed when experiencing cognitive dissonance. This should not be possible. They are apex predators, war beasts of unimaginable power. Captain Chen, now representing humanity in the Council chambers, smiled. "Ambassador, humans have a saying. There's no such thing as a bad dog, only bad owners. The Devourers aren't war beasts. They're just beings that needed someone to understand them." She gestured to the display showing Dr. Patterson's continued work with the creatures, teaching them to communicate through modified translation matrices, helping them find suitable homes in empty star systems, even working on projects to help them rebuild their civilization. "You called us fragile," she continued. "Maybe you were right. But sometimes fragile things understand other fragile things in ways that armor and weapons never could." The Council chamber fell silent as they watched the impossible sight of massive cosmic predators gently shepherding refugee ships to safety, their bioluminescent displays pulsing in patterns that Patterson had identified as expressions of joy. In the end, the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their stubborn, inexplicable ability to see past teeth and claws to find the scared, lonely creatures hiding underneath, and their infinite capacity to offer friendship to anything in the universe willing to accept it. The Devourers had found their pack, and the galaxy would never underestimate the power of a gentle hand extended in friendship again.